When I think about horror storytelling, I always look back to John Carpenter's The Thing as a source of inspiration, given how it cleverly balances the human condition with our fears of the unknown and incomprehensible without calling too much attention to itself. It's my favourite horror film because it got under my skin in repulsively creative ways while investing me emotionally in the characters and understanding the tribulations that justify the tonal shifts in their behaviour and actions. Carpenter's best work usually came from the subtlety and simplicity behind these ideas, which I feel are the two core foundations for horror, unless the intention is to be as deliberately indulgent as possible, but let's face it, I think self-grandeur has gotten way out of hand in recent memory. Even when treading on Lovecraft territory, Carpenter retained a certain restraint when divulging on information. He knew that by never fully addressing complex ideas, it kept the emotions of his stories pure, and allowed audiences to get immersed in the situation along with the characters, making for a thoughtful and more humanized experience. Except I'm always juggling between the same examples in his filmography that I've neglected to ever give credit to his forgotten cult classic that got entombed tightly between the domestic horrors of Halloween and the grisly abstract qualities of The Thing. It certainly might not be his most memorable or frightening film, but nonetheless it deserves the attention for its alluring original take on traditional ghost stories and bridging the gap between less is more in Halloween and show don't tell in The Thing. So let's talk about The Fog. So here's the thing, you might not hear Carpenter talk about The Fog all that much because he wasn't all that pleased with the final outcome. He made the mistake of comparing it to other horror films at the time, which began pushing towards graphic, gorier content that would go on to co-define the 80s, which was a steep contrast to his approach to Halloween and ultimately became his main focus when going into Halloween 2 the following year. As a result, Carpenter reshot a fair portion of the film to capitalise on the violent obsession beginning to manifest at the time, but even with the mildly increased shock value, the supernatural pirate leper antagonists were still depicted with the eerie, ambiguous minimalism of Michael Myers, while their more grotesque features helped accentuate their unapologetic brutality and heighten the dreaded sense of nihilism that the film seemed to be going for, kinda like if The Thing was cloaked mostly in shadow. Or fog, I guess. One way I like to think about The Fog is that it would fit perfectly into the anthological approach that the Halloween series was originally aiming for with Season of the Witch, considering all three films had a consistent tone and visual style, and hell, at one point Carpenter even suggested that The Fog could ultimately become its own anthology, where different monsters emerged from the titular fog, kinda like Stephen King's The Mist to a certain degree. The story follows the final preparations of the 100th anniversary of Antonio Bay, a small harbour town that becomes host to a supernatural fog, where the revenants of a 19th century clipper ship return to seek vengeance for their deaths and obtain their stolen gold. For complete context, the town's local priest, Father Malone, finds his grandfather's old journal that details how the grandfather and the original founders of Antonio Bay were responsible for pillaging and destroying the ship, which was owned by a captain looking to establish a leper colony, hence the bloated, diseased look that they leave their victims in. The events are framed as a story within a story, considering one of Carpenter's major reshoots was telling The Fog like a folkloric ghost story akin to the traditions of the genre, although it wasn't for any particular thematic purpose, he just wanted to expand the runtime. The concept actually drew from the 1958 science fiction B-movie The Trollenberg Terror, about a radioactive mist forming in the Swiss mountains that contained tentacle monsters with a big bulging eye. Yeah, the creature feature era of the 50s was seriously running dry by the end of the decade. However, what compelled Carpenter further to the idea was his visit to Stonehenge in England with his co-writing and producing girlfriend Deborah Hill, a monument that would go on to serve as the witchcraft inspiration for Season of the Witch no less, where he noticed a creepy fog looming towards them with a chilling presence as if something was watching them but couldn't be seen, and more importantly, couldn't be stopped. And that highlights the core point of the film. The Fog is technically more of a mood piece than a typically fashioned horror film. Sure, it has all the conventional scares and spooky occurrences, but like with the attention to detail given to the cinematography, editing, and blocking of the characters similar to Halloween, The Fog is honestly one of the most visually interesting horror movies to emerge from the 20th century, because it was just shrouded in a tangible, dense, and entrapping atmosphere because, well, the atmosphere is literally the villain of the story. The Fog takes a conventional condition to fear and makes it an actual danger. Even though we as the audience know it's supernaturally controlled, to the townsfolk it's just natural, so it takes for them to be completely consumed by it before they stare evil right in the face. There's something so deeply powerful about the Fog's appearance. It's like a sort of force field protecting the ghosts as a subversion to shadows, and it becomes so overwhelming that it's suffocating when we find ourselves in it with the characters. The film begins with an obligatory quote from an Edgar Allan Poe poem because it needs to firmly establish that this is in fact a bold, brooding, macabre story that should be taken seriously. Yet, sarcasm aside, it does appropriately fit the mood of the story. For all the spooky shenanigans that make the ghosts seem truly ghoulish and unstoppable, it does so from the perspective of the victims, before switching us back to the perspective of Father Malone, who points out this poignantly tragic significance to the supposed danger that's easy to overlook. I guess you could say it's somewhat a story about legacy, the hollowness of life, and the impact we leave on this world before we die. It even alludes to the idea of guilt over an unresolved debt, a debt that now comes in the form of death. Essentially, the ghosts aren't technically villains when you consider their motive. They're revenants seeking vengeance on the 6 conspirators who killed and stole from them and reclaim their stolen gold, which is discovered in the grounds of the church melted into a cross that serves as a fitting symbol of the conflict. As revenants, they exist as a reminder of the past, a sort of haunting relic that returns to cloud over everyone for the lack of accountability over evil actions. While the 6 people responsible are already dead, they've cursed the land that they've established, and have now passed on their debt to those that inhabit and maintain their legacy, hence the spirits return on the anniversary of the town. The townsfolk are indirectly an embodiment of the greed and evil that paved the way for the town's foundations, and now they pay the price for someone else's mistakes. I know it's not technically fair to compare the two, but I'd actually go as far as to argue that The Fog's tension holds up much more strongly than Halloween. There's something so discomforting about the ghosts' quiet, silhouetted appearance. We never get a good look at them, and make sense of whatever humanity is supposed to be behind them given their tragic backstory. Instead, they're soulless vessels with nothing but hatred on their minds. In fact, we don't even know what they really do with their victims. We know that they kill them with swords, that bit's obvious, but their corpses are usually left bloated and rotten as if they suffered, drowned, or simply had the essence of their life sucked right out of them. Since the ghosts were once lepers, it's as if they diseased the environment around them, completely consuming and aging all life as if it becomes part of the time that was lost to the lepers. There's actually a symbolism for the setting of a seaside harbour town like this. According to the website aresearchguide.com, in Poe's poem A Dream Within a Dream that's used in the opening, it details a surf-tormented shore, which is interpreted as a metaphor for time, in which the tide washes to the shore without impact before washing out to sea again, further reflecting on the theme of legacy or lack thereof. According to the website's analysis, it's a reflection of the narrator's agony, where the tide represents a cycle of pain and grief. Hell, the reason I'm using a secondhand analysis instead of my own is because in my interpretation, I only got the whole "I'll wait for you" trope out of it, where you have the lover waiting for their beloved to return from a voyage out in the ocean, or in the case of the trope, the whole cliche of the widow mourning over the sea. I mean, it points out this idea that the town is on the literal fringes of civilization. They're already situated next to the abyss of danger and the unknown, with the fog acting as a sort of portal to a ghost world. What Antonio Bay represents is that parasite latched onto the sanctuary of land, when really it's a place hiding a dark, terrible secret that has now finally come to light, with Father Malone willing to sacrifice himself to be the final victim to the spirits, as he is the final living representation of the evil that created the town, despite how it contrasts with the forgiveness and sanctuary that he showed to this place. Truthfully, that's probably the most appropriate way I can end this review. We see so much horror about spirits that never forget and never forgive, and The Fog is no exception. I mean, it does allude to the idea of forgiveness before immediately going back on its word, but the point still stands that The Fog uses horror to unmask humanity's own horror, which, no matter how deep you try to bury it, will still find a way to unearth itself when the time is right. The Fog is a raw, isolated event that reflects on why you can't just ignore your secrets, even in death, because those who suffered as a direct consequence of your actions will be the true haunting legacy that you leave behind. Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching. As you can tell from the background, I'm currently in the process of moving into an office space, so that explains why I haven't been on screen, which I'm sure for many is probably a good thing. So please let me know your thoughts on The Fog in the comments below, and also let me know your favourite John Carpenter film. It's a question I'm not too sure I've ever asked, even though I've asked specifically about Carpenter films in the past, because he is my favourite filmmaker after all. If you enjoyed this video and you enjoy what I do here, and you want to support the channel, I would really appreciate it if you head over to Patreon, where if you pledge just a few dollars a month, you can get early access, you can vote on future videos, you can get your name in the credits, get access to bonus videos, and even get access to our exclusive Discord chat, where you can join in with this awesome little community and talk about all sorts of things from movies, games, books, comics, you got your artwork, music, whatever you want, so please consider heading over to that. And until next time, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, stay safe, and I'll see you all very soon. Hopefully with the desk finished. Probably not, knowing my schedule. Bye!